The gardens of Kisla sparkled with morning dew as Fiona Hayes moved among the jasmine and orange trees like a quiet spirit. The daughter of the imperial gardener knew every bloom, every twig, every secret path winding through the Sultan's private sanctuary. She had grown up here, a humble shadow in the sprawling palace grounds, beneath the imposing domes and minarets of Constantinople. At 20, Fiona's life was confined to this verdant world where her father, Thomas Hayes, had served as head gardener since before she was born. An Englishman who had fallen in love with an Ottoman woman and converted to Islam, Thomas had raised Fiona alone after her mother's death in childbirth, teaching her everything about the Sultan's prized gardens. The year was 1876, and the Ottoman Empire, once spanning 3 continents, was crumbling under debts and rebellions. Fiona knew little of politics, but even she could sense the tension that had gripped the palace since Sultan Pasha Cevdet's coronation 6 months ago. She knelt to trim a camellia bush, her simple brown dress spreading around her on the grass. Her father had taught her to be invisible, a necessary skill for a Christian-born gardener's daughter in a Muslim court. Keep your eyes down, speak only when spoken to, and never, ever attract attention. You're cutting it wrong. Fiona startled, nearly slicing her finger with the shears. She looked up, squinting against the morning sun, and immediately lowered her gaze when she recognized the tall figure standing over her. Sultan Pasha Cevdet, 33rd sovereign of the House of Osman, Caliph of Islam, and commander of the faithful, stood watching her with narrowed eyes. His dark beard was precisely trimmed, his blue kaftan embroidered with gold thread that caught the sunlight. At 35, he was considered handsome, though his reputation for cold calculation had earned him the whispered nickname, the Marble Sultan. "Your Majesty," Fiona murmured, bowing her head until her forehead nearly touched the ground. Her heart hammered against her ribs. No one had warned her of the Sultan's presence in the gardens. "Forgive me. The cut should be diagonal, not straight," he said, ignoring her apology. "You'll kill the plant that way." Fiona blinked in surprise. Few nobles, let alone the Sultan himself, knew anything about horticulture. "You're Thomas Hayes's daughter," he continued, not a question but a statement. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Your name?" "Fiona Hayes, Your Majesty." The Sultan studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, his silent guard falling in behind him. Fiona remained kneeling, trembling slightly, until the Sultan had disappeared from view. Only then did she release the breath she'd been holding. Had she done something wrong? Would her father be dismissed? The Sultan had never before acknowledged any of the garden staff, let alone corrected their technique. That evening, as Fiona helped her father prepare dinner in their modest cottage on the palace grounds, she recounted the strange encounter. Thomas Hayes froze, a carrot half peeled in his weathered hands. "The Sultan himself spoke to you?" "Are you certain?" "Yes, father. He knew who I was, who you were." Thomas set down his knife with deliberate care. "That's unusual." "He corrected my pruning technique," Fiona added, still bewildered by the memory. A faint smile appeared beneath her father's grey-streaked beard. His grandmother was quite the botanist. Perhaps he learned from her. Then, more seriously, still, "Fiona, you must be even more careful now. Keep to the far gardens for a while." But the Sultan found her again 3 days later, this time by the fountain where rare lotus flowers floated on the still water. Fiona was sketching the blooms, a private pastime her father had encouraged to improve her understanding of plant anatomy. "You have talent," the Sultan said, appearing suddenly beside the marble bench where she sat today. Fiona scrambled to her feet, dropping her charcoal and paper. "Your Majesty!" I was just, sit," he commanded, though his tone was not harsh. When she hesitated, he added, "Please." Bewildered, Fiona perched on the edge of the bench. The Sultan picked up her fallen sketchbook and examined the drawing with a critical eye. "The petal structure is anatomically correct," he noted. "Most artists merely approximate." "I find beauty in accuracy, Your Majesty," Fiona replied, then immediately regretted speaking so freely. But the Sultan merely nodded. "As do I." He handed back her sketchbook. Continue. And so began a strange ritual. Every few days, the Sultan would find Fiona in some corner of the vast gardens. Sometimes he merely watched her work in silence, other times, he asked questions about specific plants or commented on her sketches. Never did he explain his interest, and Fiona dared not ask. Her father grew increasingly anxious. "This attention is dangerous, Fiona," he warned. "The palace is a nest of vipers. If the Grand Vizier or the Sultan's mother thinks he favors you in any way—" "He only speaks of plants, father," Fiona assured him, though she couldn't deny the strange fluttering in her chest whenever the Sultan appeared, or how she had begun to anticipate their encounters. One morning in late spring, Fiona arrived at the greenhouse to find a small, leather-bound book placed atop her workbench. Inside was a collection of botanical illustrations from Persia, each page more beautiful than the last. There was no note, no explanation, but she knew instantly who had left it. That same afternoon, the Sultan found her transplanting seedlings. "Did you examine the book?" he asked without preamble. "Yes, Your Majesty. It's magnificent. It belonged to my grandmother." He paused, watching her hands work the soil. "You remind me of her." Fiona looked up, startled. "I'm honored, Your Majesty." She too came from humble origins. A village girl from Trebizond who caught my grandfather's eye. His expression softened momentarily. The court never accepted her, but she transformed these gardens into what they are today. It was the most personal thing he had ever shared with her. Fiona felt both privileged and terrified by this confidence. "Your grandmother must have been very brave," she ventured carefully. The Sultan's dark eyes fixed on her face. "Brave, yes. And lonely." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away. That night, Fiona couldn't sleep, the Sultan's words echoing in her mind. Brave and lonely. Was that how he saw himself as well? The thought was startling, to imagine the all-powerful Sultan as vulnerable, as human. The next week brought chaos to the palace. Rumors spread of attempted coups, of foreign powers meddling in Ottoman affairs. Fiona saw nothing of the Sultan for days, and the gardens fell eerily quiet as many courtiers fled to country estates. Then came the summons. A palace eunuch arrived at the Hayes cottage just after sunset, his expression grave. "The Sultan commands your daughter's presence," he told Thomas. Immediately. Thomas's face went pale. "For what purpose?" "It is not your place to question the Sultan's commands," the eunuch replied coldly. Fiona touched her father's arm. "It's all right, father. I'll go." Thomas clutched her hand. "Fiona, listen carefully. If he asks anything improper of you, you must—" "Master Hayes," the eunuch interrupted, "your daughter will be safe. The Sultan awaits her in the Imperial Library, not his private chambers. She will be returned to you tonight." Somewhat relieved but still anxious, Thomas watched as Fiona was led away, her simple dress woefully inadequate for an imperial summons. The Imperial Library was a vast chamber of domed ceilings and towering shelves. Fiona had never been inside the palace proper before, and she gaped at the opulence surrounding her, the intricate tile work, the gold leaf adorning the ceiling, the priceless carpets beneath her feet. The Sultan stood by a window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. Without turning, he said, "Leave us," and the eunuch bowed and retreated, closing the heavy door behind him. Fiona knelt, head bowed, heart racing. "Your Majesty summoned me." "Stand, Fiona Hayes," the Sultan said, finally turning to face her. "And come here." She obeyed, approaching cautiously until she stood before him. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the shadows beneath his eyes. "Do you know why I've called you here?" he asked. "No, Your Majesty." He gestured to a large book open on a nearby table. "I need your expertise." Confused, Fiona approached the table. On it lay an ancient text, its pages yellowed and fragile. The illustrations showed various plants, labeled in Arabic script she couldn't read. This manuscript describes plants with medicinal properties, the Sultan explained. Some of which may grow in our gardens. I need to know which ones we have access to. Fiona looked up in surprise. I'm honored by your faith in me, Your Majesty, but surely the court physicians cannot be trusted, he finished flatly. Not now. Someone has been poisoning me, Miss Hayes. Slowly, carefully. The symptoms match those described in this text. He tapped the page. I need an antidote, and I need someone loyal to prepare it. Fiona stared at him in horror. Poisoning? But who would dare? My half-brother. My vizier. Foreign agents. I have no shortage of enemies. The Sultan's voice was matter-of-fact, but Fiona could sense the tension beneath his composed exterior. The question is whether I have any friends. His gaze locked with hers, and in that moment, Fiona understood the true weight of what he was asking. Not just her botanical knowledge, but her loyalty, her complicity in palace intrigues far beyond her station. Why me? She whispered. Because you have no connections to court factions. Because you know these gardens better than anyone save your father. And because? He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. You have honest eyes. Fiona took a deep breath. I will help you, Your Majesty. But I must tell my father. He knows far more about plant properties than I do, and he would never betray you. The Sultan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. But only your father. If word of my condition spreads, it could trigger the very coup my enemies are planning. Thus began Fiona's strange double life. By day, she tended the gardens as always. By night, she and her father worked secretly in their cottage, extracting essences from rare plants, preparing tinctures according to the ancient text the Sultan had provided. 3 times a week, Fiona would be secretly escorted to the palace, ostensibly to tend indoor plants, but in reality to deliver the medicines directly to the Sultan. No one else was to know, not his personal physician, not his food tasters, not even his mother. During these clandestine meetings, something unexpected began to grow between them. The Sultan, whom Fiona had always seen as remote and godlike, revealed himself to be thoughtful, educated, and increasingly vulnerable as he placed his life in her hands. Tell me about England, he asked one evening as she measured his medicine into a silver cup. Fiona smiled wistfully. I have few memories of it, Your Majesty. I was only 5 when my father brought me here after my mother died. Yet you speak English perfectly. My father insisted. He said I should know my mother's language. She handed him the cup. This one may taste bitter. The Sultan drank without hesitation, grimacing slightly at the flavor. What do you remember most about your homeland? Fiona considered. Rain. The constant, gentle rain. And green, a different green than here. Softer, hazier. She flushed. Forgive me. It sounds foolish. Not at all. The Sultan set down the empty cup. I've never been to England, though I've studied its politics extensively. Perhaps one day. He left the thought unfinished. Your Majesty should rest now, Fiona said gently. The medicine works best with sleep. As she gathered her vials and pouches to leave, the Sultan caught her hand, the first time he had ever touched her. His fingers were warm against her skin. Fiona, he said, using her given name without title for the first time, thank you. 2 simple words, yet they sent her heart racing. I've done nothing worthy of thanks, Your Majesty. You've given me something I haven't had in many years, he replied quietly. Trust. That night, Fiona barely slept, her mind consumed by the feel of the Sultan's hand on hers, the way her name had sounded in his voice. It was madness, she knew. He was the Caliph, the shadow of God on earth. She was a gardener's daughter, a nobody. Yet the next time they met, something had changed. The Sultan seemed to watch her more intently, to find reasons for their meetings to extend beyond the necessary exchange of medicines. I've been reading your mother's poetry, he said one evening, surprising her completely. My mother's poetry. Fiona echoed, bewildered. Eleanor Hayes published 2 volumes before her marriage. He retrieved a slim book from his desk. Your father never told you? Fiona shook her head, stunned. He speaks of her rarely. It pains him still. The Sultan opened the book and read aloud, "The garden walls that shield me are the same that keep me bound. Yet flowers find the smallest crack to spread their seeds around." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. Her mother's voice, reaching across time and death, touching her through the Sultan's lips. "I thought you might like to have this," he said, offering her the book. Fiona took it with trembling hands. "I don't know how to thank you." "Read to me sometimes," he suggested. "When we meet." And so another layer was added to their secret encounters. Between discussions of his improving health and new medicinal preparations, Fiona would read her mother's poems aloud while the Sultan listened, his eyes often closed, a rare peace settling over his features. But while the Sultan grew stronger, the empire grew more unstable. Foreign warships anchored in the Bosphorus. Provincial governors withheld tax revenues. Religious factions protested in the streets. "They say I'm too Western," the Sultan confided to Fiona one night. "Too eager for reform. The mullahs call me a heretic for suggesting girls should be educated." "Yet you believe it still?" she asked. More firmly than ever. His gaze lingered on her face. "Imagine the minds we waste, the talents we bury, by keeping women ignorant." Fiona felt her cheeks warm under his scrutiny. "Your Majesty is very progressive." "Pasha," he said suddenly. "When we're alone, I'd prefer you called me Pasha." The intimacy of the request startled her. "I couldn't possibly, please." There was something in his voice she'd never heard before, a request, not a command. "Pasha," she whispered, testing the name on her tongue. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. There. Was that so difficult? But their fragile idyll couldn't last. The following week, the Grand Vizier announced that diplomatic negotiations had been finalized for the Sultan's marriage to a Circassian princess, a political alliance meant to secure the empire's eastern borders. Fiona received the news with outward calm, congratulating the Sultan, Pasha, on the match when next they met. Inside, however, she felt as though the ground had fallen away beneath her feet. "The princess is said to be very beautiful," she said, keeping her voice steady as she prepared his now diminished dose of medicine. "So I'm told." Pasha seemed distracted, pacing the room restlessly. "The wedding will take place next month." "So soon?" Political necessity waits for no man, not even a sultan. He stopped pacing and turned to face her. "Fiona, I must ask you something." She looked up, forcing a smile. "Of course. The imperial household will be reorganized after my marriage. New staff will be brought in, old ones reassigned." He hesitated. "I want you to become the official imperial botanist." Fiona stared at him. "But there is no such position." "There will be now. You'll oversee all the gardens, with your father as your chief assistant. You'll have chambers in the palace, a salary, an official title." His words came faster now, more intense. "You've proven your worth 100 times over. The empire needs minds like yours." She should have been overjoyed at such an elevation. Instead, she felt only a hollow ache in her chest. Of course, he was ensuring she remained nearby, a trusted servant, even after his marriage. "You're very generous, Your Majesty," she said, reverting to formality. "But I couldn't possibly accept such an honor." Pasha frowned. Why not? How could she tell him the truth? That being near him as he built a life with another woman would break her heart daily? That she had committed the unforgivable sin of falling in love with him? "My father needs me," she said instead. "He's growing older, and the work is difficult for him alone. I've already spoken with Thomas. He agrees this is an extraordinary opportunity for you." Betrayed by her own father. Fiona fought back tears. I need time to consider, Your Majesty." "What is there to consider? This position will secure your future, give you status, protection. And bind me to the palace forever, she whispered. Pasha's expression darkened. Is that so terrible a fate? To remain here. The unspoken question hung between them, to remain near me? Before she could answer, the door opened, and the Grand Vizier entered without announcement. He stopped short at the sight of Fiona, his lip curling in disdain. Your Majesty, he said, pointedly ignoring Fiona, the Circassian envoy has arrived early. He awaits your pleasure in the diplomatic hall. Pasha's face instantly hardened into the impassive mask he wore for court functions. Very well. I'll be there shortly. The Vizier bowed, but as he straightened, his cold gaze fixed on Fiona. Shall I have this servant escorted out? Miss Hayes is here on my direct orders, Pasha replied sharply. She will see herself out when our business is concluded. After the Vizier had withdrawn, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. The easy intimacy of moments before had vanished, replaced by the unbridgeable gulf of their stations. We'll speak of this again, Pasha said finally. Consider my offer carefully, Fiona. After he left, Fiona gathered her things with shaking hands. Outside the Sultan's chambers, she nearly collided with a tall, elegantly dressed woman, the Sultan's mother, Valide Sultan Safia. Fiona immediately dropped into a deep curtsy. The Valide Sultan examined her with shrewd eyes. So you're the gardener's daughter who's been treating my son. Fiona's heart stopped. Your Highness, save your excuses, girl. I've known all along. The older woman's gaze was calculating. My son may think himself clever, but little happens in this palace without my knowledge. Please, Your Highness, the Sultan was truly ill. Yes, the poison. Another tedious attempt by his brother's faction. She waved a dismissive hand. What interests me is why he chose you to help him, and why he continues to summon you now that he's recovered. Fiona remained silent, eyes downcast. Look at me, girl, the Valide Sultan commanded. Fiona raised her eyes reluctantly. My son is to marry within the month. A critical alliance that will strengthen his position against the Europeans who circle our empire like vultures. The Valide Sultan's voice hardened. Whatever foolish fancy has taken root between you must end. Tonight. There is nothing inappropriate in our relationship, Fiona protested weakly. The Valide Sultan laughed, a brittle sound. I was once a girl from the provinces too, child. I recognize the signs. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. If you truly care for him, you will disappear. The Grand Vizier already suspects, and he would happily use any hint of scandal to undermine my son's authority. With that, she swept past, leaving Fiona trembling in the corridor. That night, Fiona told her father everything, the Sultan's offer, the Valide Sultan's warning, and, hardest of all, her own tangled feelings. Thomas Hayes listened gravely, his weathered face solemn in the lamplight. When she finished, he sighed deeply. I feared this might happen. What should I do, father? The Valide Sultan is right about one thing, the political situation is precarious. The Sultan needs this marriage alliance. He took her hand gently. But she's wrong to think you must disappear. Accept the position he offers. Fiona shook her head. I can't bear to watch him with another woman. Listen to me, Fiona. You found purpose here, respect. Don't throw that away for feelings that can never be realized. His voice softened. In time, your heart will heal. But before Fiona could decide, events overtook them. The next morning, palace guards surrounded their cottage. Thomas and Fiona Hayes, the captain announced, you are under arrest for conspiracy against the Sultan. That's absurd. Thomas protested as guards seized them both. We've served the Sultan faithfully for years. The evidence suggests otherwise, the captain replied coldly. He produced a vial, one of Fiona's medicinal preparations. This was found in your cottage. Our physicians confirm it contains belladonna and other poisons. That's not poison. Fiona cried. It's medicine. Ask the Sultan himself. The Sultan is indisposed, came a smooth voice from behind the guards. The Grand Vizier stepped forward, his thin lips curved in a triumphant smile. Too ill to attend to such matters. How fortunate we discovered your plot before you could administer a fatal dose. Fiona understood immediately. You've poisoned him again. Let me go to him, I can help. Take them to the fortress, the Vizier ordered. Separate cells. No visitors. The 7 days that followed were the darkest of Fiona's life. Imprisoned in a dank cell in Yedikule fortress, she had no news of her father or the Sultan. Had Pasha survived the Vizier's poison? Was her father being tortured for a confession? The uncertainty was its own kind of torture. On the 8th day, her cell door opened to reveal not a guard but the Valide Sultan herself, accompanied only by a single female attendant. Leave us, she told the attendant, who bowed and withdrew. Fiona, weak from poor food and lack of sleep, struggled to her feet and curtsied. Your Highness. Sit before you fall, the Valide Sultan said impatiently, gesturing to the cell's narrow cot. We haven't much time. Fiona sank down gratefully. My father is alive and will remain so if you cooperate. The Valide Sultan's expression was unreadable. My son is dying, Miss Hayes. The Vizier's poison was more potent this time, and none of the court physicians can counteract it. Hope flared in Fiona's chest. I can help him. I know the antidote. So I suspected. The older woman studied her intently. If I take you to him now, can you save him? Yes, Fiona said without hesitation. But I'll need certain plants from the garden and my equipment. All has been prepared. But understand this, if you fail, or if you attempt to harm him further, both you and your father will die most painfully. I would give my life for his, Fiona said simply. Something in the Valide Sultan's expression softened fractionally. Yes, she murmured, I believe you would. An hour later, Fiona stood beside the Sultan's bed in his private chambers, horrified by what she saw. Pasha lay pale and still, his breathing shallow, his skin clammy with sweat. Only the faint rise and fall of his chest indicated he lived at all. How long has he been like this? She asked, already unpacking her vials and herbs on a nearby table. 3 days, the Valide Sultan replied. The Vizier claimed it was a recurrence of an old fever, but I recognized the symptoms you once described to my son. Fiona worked frantically, crushing herbs, measuring tinctures, heating mixtures over a small flame. Why did you wait so long to bring me here? Politics, came the bitter reply. The Vizier controls the palace guard. I needed time to secure the loyalty of enough men to move against him. And have you? Fiona glanced up from her work. Let us say the situation remains fluid. The Valide Sultan's smile was thin and dangerous. Much depends on whether my son lives or dies in the next 24 hours. Fiona completed the antidote and approached the bed. Help me raise his head, she instructed, and together they managed to administer the medicine, massaging Pasha's throat to ensure he swallowed. Now what? The Valide Sultan asked when they had settled him back against the pillows. Now we wait, Fiona said, taking Pasha's limp hand between her own. And pray. Through the long night, Fiona never left Pasha's side. She bathed his fevered brow with cool cloths, administered more medicine when the hours required it, and whispered to him constantly, sometimes prayers, sometimes her mother's poetry, sometimes simple pleas for him to fight, to live, to return to her. The Valide Sultan watched silently from a chair near the window, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Dawn was breaking when Pasha's fingers twitched within Fiona's grasp. She leaned forward eagerly as his eyelids fluttered, then opened. Fiona, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I'm here, she answered, tears streaming down her face. You're going to be well. His cracked lips formed a faint smile. I knew you would come. The Valide Sultan rose and approached the bed. How do you feel, my son? Pasha turned his head slightly. Mother. You brought her to me. Against considerable opposition, she confirmed. The vizier has been arrested for treason. His supporters are being rounded up as we speak. Relief washed over Pasha's face. And Thomas Hayes? Released and safely hidden, his mother assured him. Now rest. You'll need your strength for what's to come. As the Sultan drifted back to sleep, the Valide Sultan beckoned Fiona to follow her into an adjoining chamber. You've proven your loyalty beyond question, the older woman said when they were alone. But the crisis isn't over. The Circassian envoy is demanding answers about the delayed wedding. The religious authorities are questioning my son's fitness to rule after this illness. The European ambassadors circle like sharks. What will happen now? Fiona asked. The Valide Sultan gave her a measuring look. That depends on you. Me. My son needs a wife, Miss Hayes. One who will strengthen his position, not undermine it. Fiona shook her head in confusion. But the Circassian princess is a complication we can no longer afford, the Valide Sultan cut in. What my son needs now is a story, a narrative to capture the imagination of the people and solidify his rule. I don't understand. No? The Valide Sultan raised an eyebrow. Then let me be plain. My son loves you. That much has been clear to me for months. And you love him, don't bother denying it. Fiona stood frozen, unable to respond. The common people love nothing more than a romance that transcends station, the older woman continued. A sultan who recognizes virtue and loyalty in a common girl, who elevates her not for political advantage but for love, it's the stuff of legend. But I'm a foreigner, a Christian by birth, you would convert, naturally. And your English blood might actually prove useful with the British embassy. The Valide Sultan's expression hardened. Make no mistake, this won't be easy. The court will resent you. The religious conservatives will question you. Your every move will be scrutinized. Fiona's mind reeled. Are you suggesting that you marry my son? Yes. The Valide Sultan's lips curved in a small, ironic smile. Believe me, no one is more surprised by this turn of events than I am. 3 months later, in the grand courtyard of Topkapi Palace, Sultan Pasha Cevdet took Fiona Hayes as his wife in a ceremony that combined Ottoman tradition with subtle nods to her English heritage. She wore a gown of silk and silver thread, a ruby-studded diadem on her head, and her mother's poetry book tucked into a special pocket sewn into her gown, close to her heart. Thomas Hayes, resplendent in new robes that marked his elevation to imperial botanical advisor, watched with tears in his eyes as his daughter became empress. The Valide Sultan had been right, the court whispered and schemed against the new empress. The religious authorities questioned her hasty conversion. Foreign diplomats speculated about the political implications of the match. But the common people told a different story, the tale of a sultan whose pride was humbled by illness, whose life was saved by a simple gardener's daughter, and whose heart had recognized her worth despite the vast gulf between them. Are you happy? Pasha asked his wife on the night of their wedding, when they were finally alone in the imperial chambers. Fiona, now styled Empress Fiona Ulharkheim, looked up at her husband with clear eyes. I was prepared for a life pruning roses in your garden, she said softly. Instead, you've made me the most powerful woman in the empire. How could I not be happy? Pasha took her hands in his. That's not what I asked. Power isn't happiness, I know that better than most. Fiona's smile softened. Yes, Pasha. I am happy. Not because I'm empress, but because I'm yours. The court still doesn't accept you, he warned, drawing her closer. And they may never fully do so. Then we'll make our own court, she replied simply. One of scholars and poets, artists and scientists. One that values merit above birth. Pasha's eyes shone with pride and something deeper. Have I told you today that I love you? Not since breakfast, she teased. He kissed her then, and Fiona knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, political intrigues, international tensions, the weight of imperial responsibility, they would face them together, the Sultan and his gardener's daughter, bound by a love that had transcended every barrier placed before it. In the imperial gardens, the jasmines Thomas Hayes had planted to celebrate his daughter's marriage bloomed white against the ancient walls, their scent carrying on the evening breeze, a gentle reminder that even in the most formal of gardens, wild and unexpected beauty could take root and flourish.